One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Have you been wanting to start a podcast? You've been thinking about it. It feels right. You just know this is the next thing that my business needs. Well, I encourage you to sign up for my 5-day podcast bootcamp. This is a thing that you have been looking for. It is a 5-day video series where I walk you through exactly how to start, launch, and market your podcast. And I throw in some more information about planning strategies and being consistent and how you can make the most out of your podcast from day one. So sign up for our 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp at krystalprofit.com/podcast bootcamp. And do it already. You know that you've been wanting to, so just bite the bullet and join us. Do you ever have those feelings of deja vu where you're just kind of like, wait, didn't we just talk about that? Hasn't this already happened? Well, that may be how you feel today, because I'm excited to bring back my very special guest, and I have to say, one of my close friends. Mai-kee Tsang is back again today for a follow-up on her previous episode and interview that we did in 2019, and I'm so excited to share all the insights that she has since she did all of her amazing pitches in episode 77. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go listen to that episode first and then come back to this one, because we are just unleashing so much data and information on all the amazing things that she's learned in pitching podcasts and guesting on other podcasts. So you're going to want to get your notebooks ready to take some serious notes and to learn more about guesting on podcasts. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? So like I said in the intro, I'm excited to introduce you. If you are brand new to the podcast, then you probably don't know who Mai-kee Tsang is, but I encourage you to go listen to episode 77. And that is where we talked initially about guesting on podcast. And I told her, I really want you to come back on the show because she was just finishing up this crazy idea that she had to pitch 101 podcast in 30 days, right? Like, oh my gosh, did you just kind of tense up a little bit thinking about it? So when our first episode aired, she was right in the middle of finishing up those podcast pitches, and I wanted to bring her back on to tell us the results. Like, how did this work out for you? How did this happen? So we did an interview about that, but also we met in person in October, and it was just so much fun to get to meet her in real life and to hug her neck, which is really funny because she's from the UK. I'm from Texas. And when I told her, I was like, I can't wait to hug your neck. She was like, you want to strangle me? And I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's like a Southern thing. I don't know. But apparently it's not a worldwide like vernacular term that people are used to hearing. So I thought that was hilarious. But anyway, I had the opportunity to meet her in person. It was so much fun. And so we'll just dive right into it. Here is my interview with Mai-kee Tsang. All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited to welcome back to the show, Mai-kee Tsang. So welcome back, Mai-kee.
Thank you so much for having me, Krystal. I have to say you are my first person to re-invite me back to the podcast. So I guess I did something good
Yes.
the last time I was here. So
oh my goodness. Yes. No, we are so happy to have you. I've had so many amazing people like reach out and say, I'm so happy that you had that interview with Mai-kee because like I want to know more about guesting on podcasts. So Mai-kee and I, if you have not listened, we did our first interview in August of last year. We were actually trying to remember. We were like, when was that? It feels like it was ages ago, but it feels like it was yesterday at the same time. So if you want to hear our first interview, go to episode 77 of the podcast. But I want to know what's been going on since then. Like you had just finished your 101 pitches in 30 days. Or you were actually were you in the process of finishing or had you just finished?
Yeah, I had to double check because I listened back to our interview before we jumped on, and I was 3/4 of the way through
oh my goodness.
My 101 podcast pitch challenge in 30 days. So for those who are unsure what challenge I'm talking about, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, you have to go back and listen to our first interview because she had this just tenacious goal of pitching 101 podcasts in 30 days. Okay, so you were about 3/4 of the way through when you did that. So give us an update. What has happened since then? Like just tell us all the things.
Well, I have to be completely honest and say I felt really relieved when the 101 was over. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic experience, but I don't recommend, unless you have a team, I don't recommend pitching to that many in such little time. But it definitely gave me the kickstart I needed for my business to become a lot more visible. And it's not just about being visible, but being strategically visible as well. So we can talk about more about that later. But the biggest part of this is that podcast guesting is an evergreen strategy, is a long-term relationship builder. And it's not just about building relationships with the listeners, because that's genuinely who we think of when we think about being a podcast guest. We think of how many listeners a podcast has, and therefore we need to make sure our content's really good in order to kind of convert as many people as possible to become potential leads and clients of ours. But we always forget that there's also the hosts themselves. I mean, like Krystal, you and I, like when we first connected, like we were in Amy Porterfield's Insiders Club, her alumni group. And then we got on a call, like, hey, I like you. And like, hey, I like you too. Let's do an interview. And then we met in real life. And so like me and Krystal, we've built up a beautiful relationship, in my opinion.
And now we're the peanut butter and jelly of podcasting, guys.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Peanut butter and jelly for sure. And it was just so cool, So I'd say that the biggest results that I've received, I'm definitely reaping a lot of them now. It's just that there are people consistently coming to me, whether they are people who are signing up for my private packages for podcast guesting or a launch package, or they want to interview me on their podcast or a summit or some form of partnership. All of those things have happened as a result of all of these podcast appearances.
That's so incredible. Like, I'm just like, kudos to you, first of all, for pitching that many. Like, it still blows my mind that happened. But since you said it, like, you wouldn't recommend doing that many. What would be like the biggest challenge or obstacle, or dare I say mistake, that you faced whenever you did that many pitches in such a short amount of time?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants. Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
See, the biggest concern that others had for me, because I do really well with public accountability. So when I have a big audacious goal, I've got to tell people about it, because if I don't, then I will shrink into myself when all goes to hell, that sort of thing, right? So I'd say the biggest mistake, luckily I managed to catch myself during this, but if someone else who's listening right now is thinking, oh, okay, I'm also going to do 101, or just to spite me, say, I'm going to do 102. Right? The biggest challenge, I reckon, is when you focus so much on the number that you don't focus on the purpose anymore. And that's really dangerous. So something that I mentioned in our last episode, in episode 77, was that I found myself caring about the numbers just to get to the finish line. And I knew that I couldn't pitch with that energy. And so I had to stop my process, stop myself, and give myself a couple of days, just give myself a bit of grace, say like, hey, this is a really difficult challenge. And, only pitch when you're in a good place to, because it may seem like, for those who don't believe in so much of the woo stuff, I do believe in energy. And I do believe that when you send something, like if you send something like a pitch with bad energy and it comes from a place of ego as opposed to service, then people can feel it. I feel like everything just like translates through this email that you're sending. So yeah, that's the biggest mistake, if you're focusing on the number, but so the quantity as opposed to the quality.
So I think that is such a great lesson in regards to anything that you do in podcasting, because if you make it about the quantity rather than the quality, then, it's in the long run, like it may pay off in short term, but in the long run, you're going to have either really shallow relationships with these other podcasters, or it's just not going to be as a profitable, like you've invested your time, you've researched all these people, but just to show up, just because it's another number, you're checking a box on a list, like it's not going to be as great. So I love that you share that. But do you see any kind of trends? Like, did you see anything, like looking at all the data? Because I can only imagine how much data from yeses and nos and maybes, and maybe people didn't even respond back to you. Do you like kind of see anything as you look back at all that?
Well, Luckily I was pitching, actually, this is more of a seasonal sort of thing. So I've noticed that because I was pitching around the time when everyone's going off for holiday. So I was actually really surprised that I still got a lot of yeses. But I've noticed because now that I take on private clients for this work as well, I noticed as we were pitching around the end of November and December, you're very likely to get a lot of no's or no answers at all, because this, I think it is quite seasonal actually. So I really realized that. So now I know in the future not to launch around a certain time or not to take on clients at a certain time. So I signed on a client towards the end of November, and I said to her, we're not going to pitch until mid-January. And she totally understood. She was like, oh yeah, because everyone's filling up, their content calendars. They will want to batch in advance so they can really rest for the holidays and that sort of thing. So that I definitely noticed.
Well, that's good to know too. I mean, I know personally for me, November and December was a lot of planning. I mean, I had a launch, but it was at the very beginning of December. And then it was just kind of all I've been doing for the last few weeks, the last month really is just planning. So I totally understand that. And I'm glad that you kind of brought that to the forefront of our minds. That way, as we sit down and, a lot of people are planning out 2020, either the next 6 months or the next quarter. So really think about that, because the next big break would be summer. So maybe summer could be an amazing time for you to pitch podcast, or it could be kind of a little bit more challenging for people to say yes or no. So would you say that there's a certain season or a certain time that you would advise people to pitch?
Definitely. So I'm restarting a lot of client projects because we took a break over the holidays. So we're starting towards the end of January and February onwards. And to be honest, I think summer is still okay. It's definitely towards November, December that you're likely to get more no's or a lot of postponed yeses. So be like, oh yeah, follow up with us next year sort of thing.
Right.
So that's something that I've noticed. But other than that, it's okay. I mean, something that I want to point out as well is that just because you get a no or a no response, or someone has seemed that they've just gone off the edge of the earth and you don't know where they are, you can just simply follow up with them. I had a yes in July, and she just completely fell off the face of the earth. I didn't know where she went. And then I followed up with her around December, and we finally got a booking for January. So it's the power of the follow-up as well. So even if it's not right at that given moment, or it is, just follow up, because people are human. So sometimes there is going to be a human error. And I asked her, I was like, oh, I didn't say robots. I said like, it's something about, I don't know, were the bots not working that day or something like that. Just kind of like liven up the communication. And she's like, oh yes, sorry, I'm so sorry. It's totally human error. And then she was like, oh, let me know if this works for you. And then we just did all the bookings. So yeah, that was a 6-month break,
Right.
Since we had spoken. So this is what I mean. Like the power of the follow-up is really important as well.
Well, that's so good. So tell me more about, because you're sitting here talking about, people you've worked with, like your clients and other, like your programs. So tell me more about exactly what it is that you do. I know that, we have all the guesting stuff in episode 77 where people can go back, but I know that you have, laser focused in on exactly what you want to do to help people get on podcast and pitching and everything. So tell us exactly, what it is that has changed, or maybe what has gotten better. Like, just fill us in on all the details.
You mean the pivot in my business? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So I know that the last time we chatted, it was, your incubator, but you hadn't launched it yet. Like, this was your first round of launching it. And I know that since then you've had people that have joined your program. So how did that work out for you? Like, in regards to, were people kind of nervous? Were they excited? Like, did people join your program because they had no idea, like, who would be your ideal person to work with?
So I have 2 different ideal customer avatars. So for those who want to work with me on a private basis, because the package is a significant investment. So for someone like that, I would say close to the first 6 figures or multiple 6-figure earner, because this is a long-term process. But I understand that not everybody has the budget. And for myself personally, I didn't have the budget to hire a PR agency. So instead, what I did was, taught myself the ropes. And I wanted to make this a lot more, affordable for people to learn as well, through that experience and through the experience of working with clients one-on-one. So for my Show Up and Be Heard Incubator, that's my podcast guesting program. The ideal person for that is someone who's a solopreneur, or they have a very small team, like it's just them and their VA, and they want to increase their visibility, for their business. So whether this means to grow your email list or to build good connections with the hosts themselves, because they're generally like thought leaders of some sort, right? Or is it to fill your client roster? I mean, this program is the A to Z system where you learn everything from how to even pick the topics you want to talk about, how to even showcase your expertise, how to write the pitch, how to research the podcast, how to track it all, what to do when you actually interview, and actually how to fully optimize and leverage that interview itself. I mean, I've learned recently about repurposing the interview, so you get so much pieces of content just from one thing. So it's the whole A to Z process.
That's awesome. No, and you just touched on a few things I hadn't even thought about, like, how to track the stats and how to, everything. And I know that you cover everything because you're so passionate about it. Not only, this is what I love about you so much, is you aren't just teaching something that's theory, like you have done all of this and what works really well, and probably some things that you're like, okay, I did this and I will make sure no one else ever does this again, because it's a lessons learned, like I don't think that there's any mistakes in the process. I think it's just all, I'm going to try this out and I'm going to see what works and what doesn't, and I'm going to pass on that information to my clients and people down the road as you continue on this journey. Because, and I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode, but what was your overall goal for pitching? Were you just trying to grow your podcast audience? Were you trying to grow your email list? Because this is the question that I've seen a lot of people ask is, I know I should be on other podcasts, but what should my main goal be? So that's a 2-part question. So what was your main goal? And then what do you advise other people to set as their goal?
Okay, good question. Right. So my main goal, well, the reason why I even thought about pitching to podcasts in the first place is because my mentors kept advising me to do that, because I was quite complacent around the beginning of the summer last year, because I thought, okay, I've got leads coming to me, I've got referrals coming in, it's all good. And so as a result, I got lazy with my marketing. And then there came the, oh crap moment when there was no, the well was running dry. It was bone dry. Okay. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've set myself up to crumble because I haven't been getting out there consistently. And around that time was when I did start my own podcast. And I also found that with my podcast audience, it was kind of like the same circle of people that I already knew. And so I felt like, okay, I need to have exposure to different audiences to like grow this message that I'm trying to get out there. Right. And so for me, my goal was building my email list and growing my authority, basically. And as a result, it did lead to one-on-one clients. It did lead to partnerships and things like that. So that's great. And so for those who are listening, who are thinking, okay, I'm interested in getting on podcast, but what should I do? To be honest with you, even if you do have a singular goal, it can spill into other areas of growth in your business. And that's not a bad thing. So I would say, I really want to adjust people's expectations. So as much as I love podcast guesting, I have to tell you that it's all about momentum and consistency. As much as I want to say it's an overnight success, and you will get influxes. You will, like, depending on how your episode resonates with the audience and things like that, you will get influxes, but I'm not going to say that you will get thousands of email subscriptions overnight. You could if that person had a ginormous audience and your interview was that good, but it's really about appearing consistently. I mean, there are some podcasts that are knock out of the park and they're my absolute faves, and there are other ones where I know that I should have done better. So that's why it's not a one-hit wonder sort of solution. It's really about the long-term, really committing to something like this. And honestly, when you learn the system of how to guest on podcasts, it will take you like an hour a week to pitch to 5 podcasts, or 5 to 10 podcasts, depending on how fast you are. But I'd say like 5 podcasts a week. So that's around 25 to 30 a month. Then you're good.
No, that's awesome. I love the idea of the simple approach to it. And it almost feels like there's not as much pressure, because I know I kept telling myself, especially after our first interview, I was like, okay, I know I need to get on more podcasts. And I really didn't get on as many as I would have liked to. But going into 2020, that was one of my biggest goals is, I really want to do this, because not only have I seen from you, but I've seen from other people within my industry, like of the podcast education, like people that are really accelerating their growth a lot faster. And it's because they're guesting on other podcasts. So I know that it's something that I need to do. It's one of my big focus, especially for the first quarter of 2020. But if someone's listening and they're like, okay, this sounds awesome, but Mai-kee, like, where do I even start? Like, what can I do to kind of just figure out like what the pieces of the puzzle that I need to have together? Because I know there's a lot of listeners that have either just launched or are launching in the first quarter of 2020. Like that was their big goal. And now they're like, but you're telling me I have to get on other like what would you say to someone who is just like, they're kind of still in that overwhelmed, you know what it's like.
Oh yeah, I know.
So what advice would you give to someone who's in that season of their podcast, but they do see this as something that they also want to pursue?
Okay. So if you are a new podcaster, first of all, I think it's super important just to get your own your own plan already down. So you got your first batch already underway. So you've got a couple of episodes recorded, because I don't think it's wise to do both at the same time, because the more you take on, and that's two of these new things are brand new and you're learning like the curves on both of them, is going to be super overwhelming. So I'd say if you're a brand new podcaster, focus on your own podcast for a good month or so before you start reaching out, because it's nice to have a couple of episodes under your belt, because then when you are sending your pitches, they will look at your podcast naturally, especially if you claim that you're a podcaster. They're going to want to listen to some episodes and to see how you present yourself and how you communicate. Those things are going to be like, your own podcast is going to be your asset basically in these pitches. So I'd say if you're just starting out in the podcasting world, just do your own podcast first for at least a month, and then think about how you can grow your reach through guesting on other podcasts.
That's so good. And it's so true, because I know I've had a few people reach out to me and I'm like, well, if they don't have their own podcast, I want to hear an example of them being on someone else's podcast. So that's absolutely, yes. I think that that's a fantastic idea. Like get a few episodes under your belt, like have some of that content out there that kind of establishes not only who you are, because you don't necessarily have to be the go-to expert leading, blah, blah, blah of your industry, but it shows people the basics. Like, okay, this person can communicate. This person knows what they're doing as far as, they know how to talk into a microphone properly. They know how to, carry on a conversation that's intelligent, whatever the requirements of your podcast may be. But, it's like, you want to know those things. I know I do as a podcast host. Like, I want to know that this person, like, we're actually going to have a connection and we're going to be able to carry on a conversation. So, no, I think that that's great advice, and I 100% agree with it. And I wanted to we kind of mentioned this earlier, but Mai-kee and I are the peanut butter and jelly of podcasting. So our brains are basically one when it comes to a lot of these things. And the reason why, okay, so do you want to tell the story, or do you?
I think you should, because your listeners, like they know you, Krystal, and so I think they should hear it from you. I'll chime in if I need to. But.
Okay, so like Mai-kee said, we met. First, it was in B school, right? Because we both did B school this past year. It's funny because I feel like we have some blurred lines now that we've been in each other's world. Like Amy Porterfield has, put us together, but the universe is definitely like, y'all need to be, besties in the podcast world. But Mai-kee and I were, we had the chance to meet in person in San Diego in October 2019. And this was at Amy's Entrepreneur Experience. And oh my gosh, y'all, like I won't forget, it was that first morning. It was like the day of the conference. I think it was like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. I was totally messed up on my time zone. What was the time difference for you being
It was
on
like
Pacific?
8 hours. Like I actually, I don't really get jet lag a lot. I wake up ridiculously early when I'm in America. But if I'm going to Asia, oh my God, now I'm just tapped out.
Just done.
Yeah, just done.
So I know like you and I were both like, okay, I can't sleep. Oh, wait, you're Mai-kee. Wait, you're Krystal. And it was like all of a sudden, like we met each other's eyes. Like, I don't think either one of us were fully awake yet, but then we're like, holy moly, we like give each other a hug. We're like, okay, this is awesome. So then from there, and this is where the ridiculousness really sets in. And this is how we became the peanut butter and jelly of podcasting. So, unbeknownst to me, Mai-kee is also a front row Joe wannabe in the conference circle. So I am notorious for going to conferences and being there super early because I want to get on the front row. Like, I mean, obviously there's some conferences you got to pay the big bucks. Not at this one. Like it doesn't matter. Everyone paid the same price. You show up and you get a chance to get on the front row. So Mai-kee and I were like, you know what? I think like, should we, let's just try to do this. It was crazy because I don't even remember when they opened the doors. They opened the doors at like 8:45 a.m. and we started sitting outside at like 7 a.m.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we actually created our own circle of people. You can tell the people who are dedicated because basically there are these ropes, like the velvet ropes, right? And so there were 3 doors and we were sitting in front of the middle one because obviously, right? And then for those who are serious about getting a front seat, we don't want to let anyone get past us. So we sit down and we claim our spot. Okay. And then as people started funneling into this room, like waiting outside, we created this huge circle of people who just sat down and claimed their spot. And then, oh my gosh. Oh, but the best part was on day 1 when Krystal, you have to tell this part. Like, what did you do?
I'm trying to I'm about to start snorting. I'm laughing so hard. So I intentionally brought these shoes. I did not wear heels. I didn't wear they're these little booties. So they're like short boots that were super comfortable because I knew I'd probably be standing up a lot or, there'd be a lot of waiting around. So I was like, all right, guys, I'm serious. I'm going to run to the front. And everyone's kind of like, okay, here's this Krystal girl, we've only kind of seen her online. Is she really as crazy as she seems? Yes. The answer is 100% yes. She is as silly and as crazy and as country and as Texan as she seems online. And so I was just like, whatever, I'm bolting. So I was like, okay, I got my coffee and we are ready to go. And it's so amazing because Amy's crew was filming everybody coming in and there's you can see it. I'm motioning, y'all can see me. I'm moving my hands around. You can see there's a few, very, I'm trying to think of the word, very proper ladies that are walking kind of fast. They're okay, maybe we'll get to the front. And then here comes Krystal. My brothers all played football. So I'm about to tackle everybody. I just go sprinting past. And Amy and her team posted a video later that day on their Instagram. And you can see me just hightailing it to the front. And I was like, I'm going to get on the front row. Anyway, totally long, obnoxious story, but we did
for 3 days. And I have to say something extremely important about this day 1. Okay. So like I said, there are 3 doors and this is significant in the story, right?
Oh, yes.
So there were 3 team members and 1 for each rope, 1 for each door, right? So basically, they open the doors and they're about to let out the ropes, but they don't open our rope. They do not. And so Krystal here jumps over said rope and then, and thus begin the running. And then I thought, I'm going to follow that. So I also jump over. I take off my shoes and I also run to the front because I God damn it, I want to sit at the front. But on day one, I didn't get there because I waited too soon. But days 2 and 3, I was so determined. So I had shoes off and I bolted it. I don't care how ridiculous that I also looked, but I got to the front next to Krystal like for days 2 and 3.
Well, I think that like, I feel like at some point we like locked arms or somebody did. Maybe that was just how everything happened in my mind was like, we're banding together and we're like, we are going to be on the front row. We're going to make this happen. But I mean, it was so phenomenal. So I know this is totally sidetrack off of today's topic, but I really wanted, it was so significant to meet you in person and to really connect with you. So I want to talk about a big moment that you had where you met Laura Belgray. Like, if you're not familiar with who she is, like, can you kind of tell everybody what that moment was like? Because I know that was so awesome.
Okay, so Laura Belgray, she is someone who co-created the program. It's called the Copy Cure with Marie Forleo. So again, the same circles here that we're running in. And for me, because I started out as a copywriter in this business, and so for me, she was like the gold standard, right? So she's industry leader, all that jazz. So I was literally gobsmacked when I saw her in real life, and I was like totally fangirling. I was so nervous, and I was like all shaky, all that jazz. But I plucked up the courage to talk to her, and like, I'm not gonna lie, Krystal, you were like, oh yeah, come on, go talk to Laura. And so I did. I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So I went up to her and said, hi, Laura. You probably don't know me, but my name is Mai-kee. And I just want to say that it's a real pleasure to meet you. I've been following your work since 2015, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then she paused for a moment. She looked at me and then she said this. Oh, I know you. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What now? And she's like, yeah, I know you. I've seen you around. I've seen you, respond to my emails, but I've seen that you, you've been getting on some podcasts and stuff. So yeah, I know you. And then guys, I can't even put into words how this made me feel that day. It made me feel seen by one of my biggest heroes. And that moment is just completely indescribable. And I honestly didn't think that someone like her would actually even notice someone like me, which sounds like so ridiculous, but it's like, we feel like the little people, And so for someone like her to actually know of me because of this effort of being visible and being on podcasts and sharing value, all of that actually draws people's attention, even if they don't tell you. And this is something that I want you all to know. Just like the iceberg theory of, the conscious and subconscious mind, where you see, 20% of the iceberg, over the surface of the water, but there's 80% beneath it. That's exactly the same when it comes to these podcast appearances. There is going to be a small handful of people who will have the courage to actually reach out to you. They are people who are like, oh yeah, I like you, I want to work with you, or I like you, I want to interview you. Like, there are going to be people like that, but there's going to be the vast majority of people who listen to you. They will not reach out for a long time. It could be weeks, months, or even years. But the point is, you plant the seed in their mind that you are someone to trust. You are someone who knows what they're doing, and eventually there will be a day where they come to you. And so I just want to paint that visual for you, Krystal, and for all your listeners right now, because it's so easy to get caught up in the instant results, the instant gratification. Trust me, I know how that feels, because you put in so much effort and you feel like no one cares or no one's listening if you get like cricket responses. But there's a seed that's being planted there, and you're just experiencing the underwater part of this iceberg right now. But there will be a time when you actually, you come to the surface and you see the result of everything you've built.
That was beautiful. And I don't even know like how that was like the universe that just made all of that whole story like weave together the way that it did, because I had no intention of how that all played out, but it was so true. I remember the moment that, we see there's Laura Belgray, and I knew who she was, not because of her, her being, who she is in like the copy world. She was in a mastermind with someone else that I knew, who I idolized for a long time, a blogger that I knew. So that's how I knew her. But I was like, oh, she's a big deal. That's all I kept thinking is she is a big deal. And then I look at you and I'm like, you're like, that's Laura freaking Belgray, and I'm like, well, you have to talk to her. And no, what are you talking about? I don't have to talk to her. And I'm like, you're here. Like this is your opportunity. So you never would have had that moment. And then like you said, like if you hadn't put all this energy into making yourself visible, then who knows? Like she probably would have just said, oh, thank you for, being an admirer of my work or whatever. But instead she was like, I know exactly who you are. And it was such an amazing moment and it was so beautiful. And I was so happy that I was able to see it because I was just like, oh my God, you just met Laura freaking Belgray. Like we both did. This is so cool. And we had so many more moments like that. And it was just such an amazing experience. So if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, they sound like so much fun. We are, first of all, we are so much fun to hang out with. But just know that like it's possible to find people that are in your community that are doing amazing things. And like Mai-kee, there are probably some people that could say that we could be competition. But I've never once thought that because I see the collaborative experience of working with other people. I'm so grateful to have you in my corner, like part of my hype squad and, like checking in on each other. And I'm so grateful for everything. So I just wanted to make sure I said that before we said anything else.
Oh, you are so sweet and so I just feel so squishy right now. So
so squishy. I love it. And I love your analogies and you're such a talented copywriter. If y'all are not part of Mai-kee's email, like you're missing out. You're missing out. She has some of the best emails. They're so, so good. But I do not want to in this conversation without telling everybody what you have coming up because you have an amazing masterclass coming up. It's going to be towards the end of January. Tell us all the details about that because I don't want anybody to miss out on it.
Thank you. Yeah, so towards the end of January, so from the 21st, I'm going to be running several masterclasses. It's going to be on the same thing, but just in case you can't make it at a certain time or a certain day, that's why for this time I have several options. So I'm going to be putting out a podcast guesting masterclass. So I've listened to my students, I've listened to my clients, and I've listened to my ideal customer avatar because for those of you who are looking to launch one day, like an online course or something, you got to listen to the people who are potentially going to buy, right? And so they've all told me that they really want to know how to get started. So actually, I had a completely different plan for today's episode, but it looks like we haven't been able to cover it, which is perfect because I'll be covering it in the masterclass anyway. So this masterclass is all about podcast guesting 101. So it's how podcast guesting will accelerate your visibility as an expert in your industry and how to get started. So I'm a huge fan of frameworks and these visuals and all that kind of stuff. So you'll see roadmaps on how to get started. So regardless, because spoiler alert, I am going to pitch at the end of that masterclass, but anyhow, I will be providing you like a roadmap anyway. So regardless of whether you choose to join me for my incubator program or not, that's totally fine. But I want to like equip you with the knowledge of what to do when you leave that masterclass. So if you are interested in learning the ropes of what to do to guest on podcasts and how to get started, head to masterclass.makeafan.com, which Krystal will put into the show notes for you to register your spot today.
Yes, we will have all the information that you need to know. We'll have the link for you to register. And I have to say, I attended one of your master classes last time and it was so impactful. It was like you deliver such an amazing presentation. I remember sitting there and was like, she's had to have done this like a million times before because you were just like so, oh my goodness. Like you just seemed so flawless. So like shout out to you because you did such an amazing job.
Girl, that's the first time I've done that masterclass on that topic. Up until then, I only done one other webinar, and that was probably like 3 years prior. So I've been a bit out of practice. Oh, thank you.
So amazing. So y'all have to go register if you are wanting to guest. Even if you, like we said, if you've just launched, it's not going to hurt anything to figure out how this will work. It'll actually help you in developing your overall strategy for 2020 because like we said, there are seasons to pitching podcasts. So you want to make sure that you get all the nuggets of wisdom that you need in order to have a successful pitching process going into the rest of the year. So Mai-kee, thank you so much for coming on today. But tell us tell everyone where they can find you everywhere.
Sure. So if you head to my website, maikeethang.com, you'll have all the links of the social media platforms I'm on. So I'm the most active on Instagram. And if you add me on Facebook as well, I'm not really active on my Facebook page, but I actually have the link straight to my profile. So before you send me a friend request, by the way, just like tell me that you've come from Krystal's podcast, because I don't accept everyone because I get random requests. But yeah, if you do want to get in touch with me there, that's cool. But all of that is under the umbrella of maikeethang.com. So you'll see if you're wanting to work one-on-one, the packages are there. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's all there. So everything is under maikeethang.com.
Perfect. Like I said, we will link to everything in the show notes. You will be able to get in touch with Mai-kee, but I want to make sure that you say, like, instead of just saying, oh, you came from the Profit Podcast, like say, I want some of that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like say something silly, guys. Come on. Like we like to have fun and be creative.
Yeah. Okay. You'll really win my heart if you send me a peanut butter and jelly Giphy or something like that. About, oh yeah, you've listened to the podcast.
Yeah. Like you really paid attention.
Oh yeah.
Extra brownie points for that.
Yeah. Extra brownie points. And like, you'll probably get a video response from me saying, thank you. I see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much again, Mai-kee, for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Krystal.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mai-kee as much as I did. Like there were times where we had to pause the interview because I've been sick. I've had a cold and I had like a coughing fit and then she had a coughing fit and then we were laughing because I forgot to mute it and then I forgot to unmute it. So it was like a whole debacle of an interview, but we could not wait to share this information with you. And it was just so much fun. She really is like, we're the peanut butter and jelly of podcasting, and this just lights us up. It is so much fun to talk about podcasting and the different things that we've learned because she does something totally different than what I do, but we can each learn from each other. And I really encourage you to attend her masterclass. You're going to find the link to it in the show notes, krystalprofit.com/episode 119. And you'll find everything you need to know about how you can connect with Mai-kee, how you can attend her masterclass and listen to her podcast, the Quiet Rebels podcast, as well as follow her on Instagram. Like check her out all the places because she's a lot of fun. And again, like I said, you have to get on her email list because her copywriting is out of this world. She's definitely learned from the best. And I'm so excited to see what this next year brings for her and everything that she's doing. But that does it for today. So like I said, check out the show notes at krystalprofit.com/episode 119. And if you are brand new, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. That way you get updates every time we put out brand new episodes. I've seen a lot of reviews lately, and I'm so grateful for the ones that I've received. A lot of them say, I've been binge listening to all of Krystal's podcasts, and I'm so grateful because that helps me get seen by even more people, and it helps this podcast reach the masses. That is the goal here. I am trying to reach as many entrepreneurs and help them on their podcasting journey as possible. So if you can subscribe and leave me a review, tell me what your favorite episode has been. Tell me what your number one takeaway has been in listening to this podcast, and that'll help the Profit Podcast get seen by even more people. Make sure you sign up for the free 5-day podcast bootcamp if you haven't already done that. And remember, as always, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Krystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal, it could be totally anonymous, or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Krystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.